Yo, what's up, everybody? It's me, Weep here, back with a brand new What If, and in today's video, we'll be covering what if Asta from Black Clover was Meliodas' son, and by extension, Elizabeth's son as well. Now, you may be wondering where this idea came from, and that mostly being that as of the anime right now, we do not know who Asta's parents are, which leaves things to be ambiguous, allowing us to fill in what characters they could be, as well as contributing to Asta and changing him as a character in general. So, in this scenario, a lot of things are going to change. For one, because Asta will not be abandoned by Meliodas and Elizabeth for a few reasons. Asta probably won't have the same relationship with Yuno that he would have had in the original. So that's just one of the first changes that's going to occur, as well as some other unique changes to his character, personality, and things like that. But enough of the teasing, let's just get right into this part for part 1 of What If Asta Was Meliodas' Son. So for anyone who's new to my What Ifs on my channel, or any of my videos in general, with What Ifs that is, for my first parts of What Ifs, I generally cover what I'm going to do in the What If, as well as characters, situations, and differences from the original timeline, and things like that. Obviously, since this is a crossover between the Seven Deadly Sins universe and Black Clover, there's going to be quite a few differences. So let's just get into those right now. As you guys know from the Seven Deadly Sins, Meliodas, spoiler alert, if you have not watched Seven Deadly Sins, Meliodas is actually one of the princes, the first prince of the Demonking. And Meliodas' lover is Elizabeth, one of the angels from the angel goddess race, as you would know. So you might be wondering, how do these two have Asta? And yes, the first difference is that Asta is actually half demon and half goddess in this What If. This means that Asta has two very powerful races flowing through his blood, and, which we'll be getting to very shortly, would affect the story dramatically compared to his original goals, as well as what he stands for in the anime. But enough of that, we're actually going to start getting into the actual What If now, and you may be wondering some questions, but I actually have plans how to answer everything, which will be going on in the story itself. So, if you have questions, make sure to comment them down below, but I will be covering them in future parts as well, because I have a sort of mystery I want to put into this story. Anyway, let's just get into it now. We see Elizabeth. Yes, Elizabeth, alone at their house, when we suddenly hear a loud baby crying, as Elizabeth would get up and run over to the room where we see a baby Asta, with white hair just like his mother's and green eyes just like his father's. Elizabeth would play with her son Asta, who Meliodas has helped name before he had been, well, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, Elizabeth would be raising Asta alone due to some unfortunate disappearances, such as Meliodas. With Asta and now Elizabeth being together, Elizabeth would actually encourage Asta to become a magic knight, as the magic knights were just like the magic knight squads of Leonas that she and Meliodas had remembered from a long time ago. So by the way, in case you haven't gotten this by now, manga spoilers here, Meliodas and Elizabeth's actual child from the Seven Deadly Sins is named Tristan, but in this version, Tristan is basically Asta. So, it's Asta's personality and character in this version. So, anyhow, Asta as a young child would have been very rambunctious and would have been abnormally strong for a child his age, which is to be expected to be a child of the demon prince, as well as one of the princesses of the goddess race. Asta would begin learning how to master his powers from Elizabeth at a pretty early age, so that he wouldn't destroy things in the house or people around him. And they would indeed live in the same village, very far away from the main capital, with many royals with a rich amount of magical power. Now, as Asta was a young child, he would have been able to use magic at a much higher level than anyone else's age, except for Yuno. Yuno being this poor church orphan that Asta would have run into every now and then. Asta would have met Yuno, and Yuno was much more timid as a younger child, while Asta was still rambunctious and loud. With Asta having inherited a few tendencies from his father, he would have told Yuno that he and him should go peek on girls early on, as Asta had been told by Elizabeth of the many stories of his father and the Seven Deadly Sins and what they had done during their time, with Elizabeth telling Asta to be very respectful towards girls, especially after the way that his father was, with Asta not taking that at all, with his personality having been closer to his father's than his timid mother's. Yuno would eventually get dragged along with Asta's schemes as he goes off to play with Yuno and some of the other orphaned kids, with Elizabeth having encouraged him to do so, being the kind person she was. Elizabeth herself is technically a royal of Leonis, but because they're out in the boonies, no one would know what that is. Asta and Yuno would be helping each other out more often now, as after over the years they become much closer friends. This would be the day now when Asta is about 8 years old along with Yuno, and Asta has now begun training to use his magic from Elizabeth. He would show Yuno this one day, with Yuno being shocked as he would watch as Asta uses magic. One of the orphan kids, being the girl with the pink hair, with the big fuzzy hair, she would have fallen and hurt her knee with it bleeding, and her, of course, being Sister Lily, along with the priest being rather worried about her getting sick and dying. Asta would offer his help as he reaches down and with his left side holds his left hand up. Suddenly, a light white energy would begin to spread across his hand as healing magic would encompass the knee from the goddess race's power. Asta's left eye would begin to turn a soft shade of orange as Yuno would notice this. The wound would almost disappear instantly, with Asta smiling and asking if she's all better. She would thank Asta, as of course everyone in the orphanage and the priests in general would say, with the church thanking Asta for his help. Asta would say it was no big deal, with Yuno then asking how he knows how to use magic. Asta would tell Yuno that his mom had been teaching him how to use magic since he was a little kid, with Yuno asking if he could even learn, with Yuno then showing a puff of wind saying that he's begun to master his own magic as well, and it would be cool if they could train together. Even though Asta is probably a recovery mage, he could still probably learn a thing or two from him. Recovery mage? He would ask as he has a questioning look on his face. He would then tell him that he's actually super strong, as he would punch his fist with his other hand, saying he's going to get even stronger than his dad was, with a look of embrace of, well, admiration as well as a goal ahead of him, looking far beyond him. Asta would then tell Yuno tomorrow to meet him up in the fields near the village, and he'd show Yuno how powerful he was. Yuno would do as he says, as the next day Yuno would go to the fields, where he sees Asta waiting there sitting on a rock, looking rather impatient. As soon as he arrives, Asta would jump up as his hair sways in the wind, as he waves to Yuno. He would then ask Yuno if he's ready. Yuno would hold his hands out telling Asta he's ready, thinking that since both of them don't have grimoires, this is going to be a very fair fight. Oh, how wrong you are, Yuno. With him not even knowing how Asta's body is fundamentally different than his. Something that you all should know is that, just like in the 7 Deadly Sins, since both Meliodas as well as Elizabeth can use magic without a grimoire, so can Asta. Because Asta is technically, well, I'll get into that. But anyway, Asta is able to use his full magical power without a grimoire, which is something very interesting that is not possible, really, in the Black Clover universe at least, without a grimoire to use to channel their power to use spells. As Asta's about to power up, Yuno would be shocked as he sees and feels the ground shaking. Yuno's about to give up when suddenly Asta asks if he's ready. Yuno's eyes are now locked on Asta, as on the right side of his face, a black, purplish mark was beginning to spread across his skin, and his eyes had now become black and empty. This demonic-like power would begin shaking across his body as sparks begin to fly. Elizabeth would suddenly stand up as she looks out the window, seeing the dark clouds surrounding, as she thinks that Asta must have unlocked his demon power, just like Meliodas is able to. With Elizabeth running out of the house to try and stop him from using it against Yuno, Meliodas would ask Yuno if he's all set to go. Yuno would then be shocked as he says he's about to give up, with Asta running forward telling him he's going to win. Suddenly, just as he's about to throw a punch, he would move it just past Yuno's head to the right-hand side, and behind it a whole force of wind would come shaking, ripping the ground of wheat asunder, as the entire ground behind Yuno is now destroyed from just one punch. This would be when Yuno would meet Elizabeth for the first time, as Elizabeth would run up behind Asta and put her arms around him on the right-hand side and left-hand side, asking him with a soft, calm voice, "What are you doing, Asta?" With Asta turning around looking very scared, we can see Elizabeth with her eyes closed, as she then would open them with the goddess symbol eye in one. Asta would then apologize, saying he didn't mean to do it, he was just showing off. Asta would quickly seal back his demon power as he tells his mom he's really sorry, with Elizabeth patting him on the head and telling that he's not supposed to use that outside, and telling him that it's dangerous for him to do that. Asta and Elizabeth would look over, as we see Yuno standing there basically about to pee his pants, with Yuno having just almost been killed, as what he would imagine. Yuno would tell Asta that he's amazing, with Yuno having been shaken to the core. Yuno would ask how powerful Asta is, and how it can even be that strong without a grimoire. Asta would say that he trains every day, just like what his dad used to do. When he would ask who his dad even is, both Elizabeth and Asta would get quiet for a second, as we now see a flashback to when Asta was now just a baby, with Asta not having this memory but her mother telling him about it. Elizabeth and Meliodas are raising Asta together at their house now out in the middle of the boonies here in the Clover Kingdom. Do you really think he'll be safe here? Elizabeth would ask as Meliodas is now putting a cloak over around himself. Yeah, we'll be safe here, Elizabeth. There's something I gotta do, though, he would say. He would tell Elizabeth everything that he's planning on doing, and that he hopes that she'll be alright here for the next few years with Asta, and he promises that he'll come back. He would kiss Elizabeth as he holds her close, telling her that she'll see her very soon, with Elizabeth crying as Meliodas leaves, telling him that she should come back as soon as he can. This is when we would see Meliodas be leaving to go and report to the Wizard King. Wizard King Julius would have met Meliodas many, many years ago, when he had first landed there from a dark portal from the ground. He would have found Elizabeth trying to heal Meliodas as best as she could, with black tendrils of energy surrounding Meliodas' body. Julius would have helped the wounded Meliodas along with Elizabeth, and this would be before they even had Asta, and helped them eventually come to live in the Clover Kingdom, far away from the royal capital, away from people, where they could have again regained their bearings until they were ready to go home. That is, if they could return home. Meliodas would have explained everything to Julius by that point, but I won't be getting into that in this part, but in the future parts I'll be explaining exactly what happened during the 7 deadly sins. Anyhow, Meliodas would have now reported to Julius, who would be telling him that he would be going to the Spade Kingdom, where he'd been sensing some extremely demon-like magical power. And in order to return home, like he'd been telling Julius they'd been wanting to do for a long time now, Meliodas had to find it because he would need it for something. Julius would give Meliodas permission to leave the kingdom, telling him that his secret will be safe with him and he won't tell anyone about his son or his wife. Meliodas would thank King Julius of the Wizard King and tell him that he will repay him back someday, as Meliodas would leave the kingdom and head towards the Spade Kingdom, the kingdom that worships demons. Anyway, as I said, years have passed now and Meliodas still has not returned, unfortunately, for very specific reasons, which I won't be getting to for several parts now. But back to the actual story, Asta has just revealed his demon power, with Elizabeth now explaining to Yuno, and Asta telling Yuno, his first friend, that he was actually not a human, with Asta being well aware of his actual parents being a goddess and a demon. Yuno would be shocked to hear this, but he won't doubt it after seeing that monstrous strength. But this wouldn't make Yuno run away from Asta, as he'd always been known as a prodigy, and having someone that was above him in terms of magical potency and power was almost reassuring to him, as he felt like he could almost be considered normal. Asta and Yuno become close friends at this point, and the years would pass. In this version, though, Yuno doesn't look down on Asta like he had pretended to in the original for those years. This would all come to the forefront after Asta and Yuno would both reach the age of 15. Where they would both head to the tower where they were to be to receive their grimoires. Yuno at this point is renowned for his magic in the village, and he is the pride and joy of Hodge Village, with Asta not having revealed his power again in many of the years after he had first fought against Yuno. Asta had still been training, though, as he had found the giant demon skull in Hodge Village himself and would be training there every day. However, instead of drinking that magical aiding potion since he already had magic, he would simply be physically training because of what his mother had told him about the 7 deadly sins and their physical strength and how it was beneficial in fights against other people who can use magic. I also think this was very smart, and he wanted to be just as cool as his father was to his mom, and he wanted to impress everyone in the village, especially Sister Lily, who he had proposed to multiple times by now, saying that he was literally a goddess who she could worship, and she would deny him, respectfully saying that she was not interested. Asta would be training super hard to become the best he can be, with him having tried his own father's tricks of stealing Sister Lily's panties, with him being slapped by water extremely hard every time. Asta at this point would have now learned a little bit more, and it would now have a full handle at least on his angel's powers. With his demon-like powers still being uncontrolled due to not having anyone to teach him how to use them, he would still have access to them though, in which it would increase his physical strength and magical power. Anyhow, Asta would be now heading towards where the Grimoire ceremony would be in the tower with Yuno, as well as the other kids who were turning 15 in Hodge Village and surrounding villages. As all the Grimoires are being sent flying out, Asta would be holding his hands up waiting for when he closes his eyes. After several minutes, everyone would be shocked as Asta would open his eyes, look to the right, where he sees Yuno having received a 4-leaf clover grimoire. A 4-leaf clover, people would be whispering, as the last person who's had that was the first Wizard King. The Wizard King, Asta would be thinking, as he remembers the Julius guy that Elizabeth had told him about who had saved his dad and mom. At this point, Asta would be thinking a lot about how he wanted to become like the Wizard King, strong and helping to people, and it was his dream actually, as well as Yuno's, to become so strong that they could be the Wizard King. That was Asta's dream. And Asta would watch as Yuno, his rival, had actually just received a 4-leaf grimoire. He was proud of his rival, and would think now it's his turn to get one too. As he closes his eyes hoping for one to appear, nothing would happen. And you may be wondering why, but as I've already explained before, Asta's body is different as well in this timeline as his was in the original, with him not having the same kind of magic as other people in Black Clover. People would be laughing at Asta, as in this version, Asta would be sitting there as his eyes are wide open, thinking that there's no way he didn't get one. As people are mocking and laughing at him, Asta would consider to unlock his demon power and make them stop laughing, as he feels himself beginning to get mad at them. Asta would hold himself back as he then remembers what his mom had told him, that he was special and different from other people, and that it wasn't his fault if things were different for him. He remembered what his mom had told him before he had left that very day, telling him that she was proud of him no matter what, as she would then tell him that she doesn't have a grimoire either, with Elizabeth having expected this to happen. He remembered what she had told him as his shoulders were then slumped to the ground, as he just falls to the ground feeling completely empty, sad that his hopes of having received a grimoire just like Yuno have gone a dash. With Asta leaving the area, he would now be walking alone, as we would then see Yuno as well. Yuno would be walking away when Asta would see a shadowy figure following after him. What's that guy going after Yuno for, Asta would think, as he would then run after where he sees Yuno walking down that long alleyway. With now the Magic Knight who had been kicked out of the Magic Knights, the one with the chain ability, would now ambush Yuno, taking his 4-leaf clover grimoire from him and threatening Yuno's life, saying that this can sell for a high price. Asta would then yell from behind, telling him to get away from Yuno, as Asta would then look his eyes up, with Yuno looking towards Asta. The Magic Knight would then turn around and ask, "Oh, it's the brat who can't even use magic. You didn't even get a grimoire. How pathetic," he would say, as he begins laughing. Asta would tell him to shut up, as he would then begin walking towards him calmly. Yuno would then tell Asta he doesn't have to do it, with Asta now telling him to shut up, shut up, shut up. He told him that he doesn't need a grimoire. As he's saying this, suddenly a chain would come flying towards him. Asta's pure, raw physical strength as a demon would suddenly rip the chain as he grabs it, ripping it out of the guy's arm, as he keeps pulling until more of the guy's magic's being used. "I dare you to come at me," he would say, as Asta would then reach to his left waist, where we see a small sword. This sword, of course, being Lost Vein, the sacred treasure of his father, Demon Prince Meliodas. He would then send another chain flying towards Asta. Asta reached back as he pulls out the sword and says, "You asked for this! Full counter!" he would say, as he then swipes with the blade, as he uses his own father's technique that he had been training all these years to use from pure memory of what Elizabeth had told him how it worked and how it was called and used. He had finally been able to master just full counter. He cannot use full negate or full counter revenge like his father can, but he can use full counter. As he uses this, suddenly this would be when the chain would then turn around and slash back towards the Magic Knight. Yuno would be impressed. Asta found a way to negate magic? No, it's a reflection technique, he would think, as Asta would then be holding Lost Vein, telling him he's not going to go easy on him, as he runs towards him using the sword and cutting up the chains and fighting like his life depends on it. Using his pure physical strength, he'd be beating this man down. As this strange child with a strange sort of magical power would interest a flying bird called Nero, we see suddenly as a grimoire begin to drop out of the sky. Asta would turn around as he notices it. "What the?" he would say, as he then sheaves Lost Vein, with the chain user now trying to crawl away with Yuno's grimoire. Suddenly, the grimoire, which would now float in front of Asta, as a black and red energy would begin to surround it. This is, he would think, demonic energy. Just like, suddenly Asta's demonic energy would begin to synchronize with the book. Asta can now feel his connection to the grimoire, as he then would sheave Lost Vein, picking up the entire sword and placing it inside of the grimoire, creating a brand new spell, the Lost Vein Sword of the Demon Prince Meliodas. With now 2 swords in the book, he would see a new blade that he has without him even knowing what it is. the Demon Destroyer's sword. With Asta realizing that as he reaches with his right hand to grab it, that sparks are flying off his right side. I have to use, he would think. As he reaches to his left, using his angelic side of power that he has access to from his mother, he's able to grab the Demon Destroyer sword and hold it without it absorbing any of his magic, due to, as I said before, Black Clover and Seven Deadly Sins magic being on different frequencies, allowing Asta to use this anti-magic that only would affect people from Black Clover. As he pulls out the anti-magic sword, it feels weightless to him, as he then tells this guy that he's going down. As Asta begins swinging at a maximum speed, slashing at this guy and beating him to a pulp, before he tells him that he's going down. At this exact moment, a brand new form of energy would have entered Asta's body, directly between his angelic and demonic sides. He now has access to null magic, nullifying magic through anti-magic from the demon of the book. Yuno would smile as he tells Asta he knew that he would get one. He knew he would get a grimoire. Asta would look up as he smiles, with his right eye actually appearing red right now. He would then thank Yuno so much for his believing in him, as he would grab the 4-leaf Clover grimoire and put it in his hand and give it back to Yuno. Asta would then deactivate the anti-magic sword, as he then closes the grimoire and puts it at his side. He would now be able to feel this different energy, as Asta is able to sense magic in this version because of his ability from Seven Deadly Sins, because if you remember, they can do that. He could sense inside of him that he has a third origin point. He has his angelic side, his demonic side, and a new red and black, a dark energy that nullifies the magic from this world. Asta would feel himself as he's about to pass out, realizing that he just absorbed 3 types of magic, and his body wasn't used to this much strain. With Asta falling to the ground, almost unconscious from the amount of physical energy he would put into it, he would now be smiling as Yuno would help Asta up as he would carry him back to his house, and Elizabeth would greet him. She'd be shocked as she sees that Asta actually has a grimoire, with Asta saying that he's going to be a magic knight, and he's going to become the Wizard King, no matter what. If you guys want to know what's going on with Meliodas, Elizabeth, and why they're in the Black Clover universe, as well as what's going on with Asta and how he even has access to the anti-magic devil, then make sure to let me know by hitting the like button on this video, comment down below what you thought, and subscribing to the channel for more videos from me. We're almost at 10,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Goodbye.